Starting. Hello, everybody in chat room land and on the YouTube land. Starting.
Uh-oh. Echo.
Oh, you got to pause your YouTube video.
Did it? Yeah, I just did it.
There you go. Alrighty. Let's get this show on the road. Fine Life Podcast, episode 36. Hold on, I need to hit the record button.
That'd be nice.
That would be useful. At least I remembered. That would have sucked. Flying Life Podcast, episode 36, recorded on whatever today is. May 16th. May 16th, 2018. God, that sucks. I'm totally going to do that again.
At least you got the year right.
Well, I almost didn't. Where the hell did my soundbite go? Why is it putting soundbite down there? Everything was all set up and good, and now it's not. Do this. Ha ha ha. Yes, I know. A take two. Huh. I wonder what other podcast that goes live on YouTube gets it right the first time. Still trying to think of one.
I know, right? Well, I can think of one, but they're way up in the standards.
We've upped our standards, so up yours. Not having a stand for my iPad is really annoying.
I have one, but it only goes horizontal. It doesn't go vertical, and it's annoying when you're trying to type, and never mind. It's a pain in the butt.
All right, where's the application? Why does the application?
You're kind of blurry.
Oh, that's what my wife says. Like, I can't keep this application from hiding itself. Like, it's hiding itself off screen. It's the application I use to...
It's okay. I'm going to have my Three Musketeers while I'm waiting.
And I'm going to have my Three Musketeers while I'm waiting, too. So much for being on time.
Yeah.
Whoa.
You jinxed us.
Jinxed it. Do you know why? Because I jinxed it. I'm going to unplug my iPad, get rid of Duet for a second, put it somewhere where I can see it.
We're in dress rehearsal right now.
We're trying to be live.
We're trying to be live. My wife goes, "Are you on?"
Nope. We're on, but we're just not working. All right. Well, this is annoying. Do you know I said Duet is a great app and it's worth the $10? I might be changing my mind right about now. All right, there we go. I can at least see where it is. All right, let's start this again.
Let's do it.
No, I don't want to update my iPad. Thank you, iTunes. All right, here we go. May 16th. Happy start of Ramadan.
Oh, that's right.
Those Islamic brothers and sisters. Fly Life Podcast. Oh, let me do this. Audition. Chord. Command A. Command Option Delete. Stop. And A. Fly Life. Now it's not even picking me up. Hello? Test.
I can hear you. I can hear you.
Well, I'm glad you can hear me. Say something.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10.
Okay, that's good. There we go. I somehow deleted myself and my track out of Audition. Blind Life Podcast, episode 36, recorded May 16th, 2018.
No music.
Really?
Nothing.
We'll fix that.
Can't hear you.
But you can hear me now.
Now I can hear you, yeah.
Now I have Soundbite back open. And that's why you weren't getting any music. Maybe the third time is the charm tonight.
Let's do it.
Flying Life Podcast, episode 36, recorded May 16th, 2018. Welcome to Flying Life Podcast, a podcast about just that, flying, aviation, and I guess our lives. I'm Dispatcher Mike. I'm a dispatcher for a major airline based in the United States. Joining me again in this episode is Dispatcher Greg, another dispatcher for a different major airline, also based here in the United States. Greg, how have you been?
Hello, Mike. I've been okay. It's been a crazy week at work, and you shared some of those experiences earlier. But yeah, it's been interesting.
Yeah, it seems that spring has sprung, the thunderstorm season has began, and the command center is commanding, and yeah, pretty crazy stuff.
It's been a while since I've seen thunderstorms. Well, let's put it to you this way. This type of pattern for May it seems like the storms are more of a summer-like pattern rather than a spring-like pattern. And if this is a taste of what's to come in the summer, I'm going to need lots of alcohol. But, of course, not when I'm working. Wouldn't do anything like that. But
only for the train ride home.
Only for the train ride home.
Which is I love about your commute, because you can drink on the way home. My commute, that's still illegal to drive and drink, as it should be.
Yeah.
So in this episode, we're going to talk about the Szechuan Airlines A319 that had the window cockpit window failure, and we'll talk a little bit about that, what happened there. We're going to talk about how Uber plans to get flying taxis off the ground. And we're going to talk, the topic this week came from the mind of dispatcher Gregg, and it's all about weight restrictions. And weight restrictions, not that dispatcher Mike weighs too much, but weight restrictions with the airplanes and takeoff and landing restrictions and flight planning weight restrictions that we have. And that'll pretty much wrap up the show. So without any further delay, we're going to hit this button over here. All right, our first story comes from Reuters, and it is a Szechuan Airlines jet makes an emergency landing after cockpit windshield breaks off. I don't know exactly how a windshield breaks off, but there was a catastrophic failure of the right window on the Airbus A319. The flight made an emergency landing in Chengdu on Monday after the windshield of the right side of the jet's cockpit failed. The Chinese Aviation Authority said no passengers were injured by the incident, but the pilot sitting in the right seat, who is usually the first officer, suffered scratches and a wrist sprain. Thankfully, it's only scratches and a wrist sprain after looking at the pictures. A cabin crew member was also injured in the descent, it added, without providing details on what had caused the windshield to break off. I hate that phrase, break off. Fail. Let's call it fail. The flight, Szechuan 8633, left the central Chinese municipality of, on Monday morning, and it was bound for the Tibetan capital, the authorities said. Aircraft was a 319, as we already said. It was en route. I think there were about
23,000 feet.
Yeah. Oh, 23. I think they were a little bit higher, 25, somewhere. Anyway, the window failed. And then another Reuters article about said the headline is Szechuan Airlines co-pilot sucked halfway out of the cockpit, the captain says. And this is the co-pilot of the same flight was forced to make emergency landing, was, quote, sucked halfway, end quote, out of the airplane after windshield blew out. Lou, the captain, hailed a hero on social media after having to land the Airbus manually. Oh no. The aircraft had reached a cruising altitude of 32,000 feet when a deafening sound tore through the cockpit. The cockpit experienced a sudden loss of pressure and drop in temperature. When he looked over, the cockpit's white windshield was gone. There's no warning sign. Suddenly, the windshield just cracked and made a loud bang. The next thing I know, my co-pilot had been sucked halfway out the window. Everything in the cockpit was floating in the air. Most of the equipment malfunctioned. I couldn't hear the radio. The plane was shaking so hard I could not read the gauges. The co-pilot was who was wearing a seatbelt, as you always should be wearing your seatbelt while you're flying, was pulled back in. He suffered scratches and a sprained wrist. And that's it. That's pretty much repeats everything else that's going on insane. All
I can say is Airbus.
Really? Really? I don't see it as a. So let's talk about a windscreen and how it's designed. It's not just a single pane of glass. It's actually 3 panes of glass in there.
It's pretty thick.
Yeah, you got an outer, you got an inner, and a middle. So for something to break all 3 of them is pretty amazing and pretty insane in my thought process. The fact that, anytime we're up in the flight deck or flying at all, if I'm not up and moving, my seatbelt is securely fastened because you never know when you're going to hit any turbulence or anything like that. So it was it's a little normal to have that. But man, for me, it's like, man, you're up there on cruise. Most of the time when you're taking off, man, you take those shoulder harnesses off pretty much right after takeoff and that initial climb. The shoulder harnesses are pretty much off of everyone in the flight deck. It's like, man, maybe the shoulder harnesses would have helped prevent him from any further injury. But taking a look at the photos, the whole, I could call it, it's not a dashboard, but that's what it would be in the car. That whole MCP, the mode control panel that's on top on the right side, also exited the aircraft as well. But amazingly, the iPad was still in its mount in the pictures that I saw. So mode control panel gone, iPad still intact with the pictures. Do you see any of the pictures, Greg?
No, actually I haven't, but my question is, so they say he was sucked almost halfway out?
That's what the article says.
I wonder, media being the media, like, I can't imagine the first officer, literally being like, I don't know, like being halfway off the aircraft, being sucked out, a hole being that big that it can cause that kind of.
Well,
I don't know.
When you think about it, it's the windscreen on the Airbus is still pretty large.
Yeah,
it's a big hole. But there does go that whole physics. How tight was the seatbelt? How big was the guy? How close was he sitting to the windscreen? Things like that. Sucked half out, maybe not. Head hitting the head departed the aircraft, maybe. But he's honestly, I'm pretty sure he's lucky to be alive.
Oh yeah.
And just think about that. You lose. They lost all their automation mainly because the mode control panel departed. Which, when you get into the Airbus logic, you now lose all of your facts and your flight augmentation computers, and the aircraft goes back down to direct law. So you are hand flying the airplane directly. You are in direct law. So none of your automation will work. You don't have auto throttles anymore. You don't have anything. You have to fly the airplane, which I kind of gasp at. They got to fly the airplane. Because not that big a deal. The big deal for this, what I get out of it, is you have the sudden noise of 300 knots worth of air coming in the hole that's now in your flight deck. Anything that's loose in the flight deck is blowing all over the place. And radio communication would be near impossible because, like the captain said, he couldn't hear the radios. Most of the pilots that I know that fly the Airbus wear the small little Tilex headsets that will come off quite easily. They're not like the Bose or the David Clarks or the Lightspeed Zulus that are on your head like we use in general aviation. They're not those. They are a lighter, flimsier material because there's not as much noise to overcome like we do in the general aviation world to overcome. So I find that to be a very tricky thing for them to overcome. But all in all, it's
interesting.
Very interesting story and scenario. You threw this Uber one in here. You want to talk about Uber?
Yeah, well, I guess let me pull up the link here. That's going to be the transportation of the future, according to this article. that instead of there being Uber cars, there's going to be Uber airplanes or Uber taxis, flying taxis. So this is an article by, well, it's by Fast Company. I'm not sure who they are, but NASA also put out an article, which I don't have the link for that, but basically, they're trying to, Uber has developed plans to develop these ports, so to speak, and they are going to be having flying cars on demand. So if you want to fly somewhere with Uber, they'll pick you up, fly you there with a flying taxi, as they call it, and get you to where you want to go. This project is going to cost an estimated, was it $4.5 billion, I believe? Is that what I was reading here? But thinking about this, okay, so if you're going to have these flying taxis, is air traffic control going to be handling that? Is that going to be a dispatch function? How is that all going to be regulated?
Yeah.
There's no talk of how it's going to be regulated. There's no talk of who's guiding these things. Is it going to be based on, using radar on board these things?
Yeah, it's definitely something that is intriguing. And what part of the FARs are they going to fall under? Is this going to be a Part 135 air taxi operation? Is this going to be a 121 scheduled service where they're going to have scheduled flights to and from different Uber ports? Is it going to be something more on demand? Where does the dispatcher lie into it? Where does pilots, air traffic control lie into it? Where do our general airspace rules lie into this? Where does the seemed avoid lie into it with the all of that stuff? So a lot of questions, and Joanna, honestly, these are questions that are being discussed. And I know there are members of the airline and dispatch community that are in these meetings with Uber and with NASA and all of that, especially some dispatchers from Acme.
Members of the airline and dispatch community. Sorry.
And dispatchers from our union are also involved with that. So it is definitely something that is intriguing. Now, Greg and I are not discounting the future, but it is something that we are very precautiously optimistic on. Let's just say I feel that there's a lot of questions to be answered still. There's more questions than answered, let's put it that way. And then what's going on.
Just as a side note, not necessarily related to Uber, but for those of you who are on Facebook or just in general, if you go on the ADF, which is the American Dispatch Federation website, they actually had a seminar with NASA, was it back in 2 months ago or so, about the dispatch role in drones. And they put together a big PowerPoint about the future plans of drones airspace regulations, and all that kind of stuff, and what the ideal role the dispatcher will be playing with drones. And it's pretty eye-opening if you read it. It's about, I don't know, 20 pages on a PowerPoint put together by the ADF, but I think it's worth taking a look at it. Maybe we can put a link to it in our show notes so people can take a peek at it. But
yeah, it's interesting. I had a colleague that went to that seminar, and she is a user of the UAVs. The company didn't know that I had a Part 107 certificate, so they didn't send me. But they're like, "What do you mean he's got his own drone business?" I guess that's a bad thing about keeping things from your company. You don't get invited to cool things like that. But this is absolutely we're in a turning point. This is a historic time in aviation. We do need to figure out how we are going to integrate the drones, the large drones, the small drones, all drones into our modern airspace system that we have here in the United States and around the world.
Yeah.
So without having to beat that horse any further, let's go ahead and move on to the topic after I hit this button right here. All right, so when Greg and I were talking and texting last night and this morning, we're trying to figure out what exactly we were going to have a podcast on and what we were going to do. So both of us played the game of Flight Operations Manual Roulette, where we kind of took the pages around the PDF. We just kind of scrolled, and then hit the stop button, and Greg's idea won. His roulette beat out my roulette. So, Greg, why don't you talk about our topic a little bit?
Weight restrictions. So, Mike, have you ever gone to the airport, tried to get on a flight, you get to the gate, and they say, "I'm sorry, dispatcher Mike, we can't put you on the aircraft because we're weight restricted." Has that ever happened to you?
No, because I try to avoid those flights.
Ah, you're a smart man.
But have I made that happen for other people? Why, yes, I have.
All the time, right?
Yes.
Yeah, we're getting into that time of the year, summer, where you get a lot of these weight-restricted flights. And we're going to talk a little bit about what causes these types of issues. And there's lots of different factors, probably more than we could talk about. But when you start factoring in weight restrictions, there's a couple key things that can cause your flight to be weight restricted. So basically, when we say a flight is weight restricted, what do we mean? We mean that the flight there's different types. There's takeoff weight, a takeoff weight restriction, meaning you're too heavy to get off the ground, right? So we call that your takeoff. And you're gonna have to help me with some of this, Mike, because I don't memorize all this stuff. And
you don't have this memorized?
No. Our wonderful flight planning system does all this for us.
Here we go. So there's two general types of restrictions when it comes to performance. You have a performance takeoff limit, and this is going to be a limit due to the takeoff restriction of the of the runway or the climb limit. So you have your takeoff in your runway allowable takeoff weight and your climb limit weight. The other one is a structural limit, and that is to what the airplane is designed to. So you have your structural weight limits of your takeoff weight limit. That's your max takeoff weight. You have your max landing weight. That is the weight that the aircraft is designed to land at. And then you have your zero fuel weight, which is the maximum weight the aircraft can hold without any fuel on board, hence zero fuel weight. So those are your structural weight limits. Those are pretty easy, and I'd like to say about 95% of the time, any weight limits that you have are going to be the structural weight limit. Most of the time, the performance weight limit far exceeds any structural weight limit. Would you agree with that, Greg? Is that kind of how it operates up there at the Acme Global?
I would say that's probably 90% of the time.
Okay.
And we'll talk about that. But so, Dispatch Mike, why does Denver have long runways?
Because it's high. Well, Denver's high in multiple. Denver's pretty high in multiple ways now.
Yeah, it's.
But no, I mean it's an airport that's at altitude, So now you have a higher altitude. Higher the altitude, the less air molecules there are to fly through the engine over the wing, which means, especially in Denver when it gets hot, because it does get hot in Denver in the summertime, now you have heat and altitude combined, which will give you poor aircraft performance.
Correct. That is one of the airports where performance comes into play because of, as Mike mentioned, the heat and the type of aircraft that you may be flying out of that airport as well. That has a big issue with weight. Other airports that have that same kind of restrictions, any of the ski location airports. Even in the summer, we do fly out of ski locations, right? We fly out of Hayden. We fly out of Colorado Springs, Jackson Hole. Those are all high elevation airports. And all it takes is the temperature to be somewhere in the 80s. And now you're taking a huge hit because you're high up and it's warm out. And you could be easily restricting your payload by 15 to 20%.
Yep, and internationally, some of those other high altitude cities would be Johannesburg, Tegucigalpa. While it's not high altitude, that's a very big performance limiting airport. Quito in Ecuador, and I want to think there's one more that I'm just not thinking of right now. But anytime you have altitude, you automatically are going to need a longer runway to deal with that set altitude. And thank you, Lane, in the chat room. Mexico City. Mexico City is a big one.
We don't have many problems out of Mexico City in terms of our aircraft. At least I can't remember having a weight-restricted flight out of there. But the elevation is high, so you could have problems, and you get those warm days out there. But another airport I want to talk about that's not high in elevation. Mike, have you ever planned a flight out of Orange County?
Oh, I love Orange County.
Have you ever planned an Orange County to Atlanta? I don't know if you've.
Yeah.
And
it sucks.
In the middle
Orange
of the
County,
summer,
Minneapolis always sucks too.
It's about 19, let's call it 22C. You've got a 4-knot tailwind, and they're using runway 20 for departure. And you're trying to plan your flight. It's a full flight going out. What happens?
Well, now you're trying to take off. It's hot, and you're taking off towards the terrain opposed to the ocean. So now you have your climb limit, and that's already a short runway anyway out there in Orange County. So now you are runway limited, your obstruction limited, your climb limit limited, and it's hot. And yeah, I think I hit them all there.
You pretty much did. So in a real world example, today I planned a flight out of Orange County to Chicago O'Hare. Temperature was 20C at departure, 4-knot tailwind. Actually, the winds were variable at 4 knots. And I could not get the FAR required fuel on that aircraft with the payload that we had planned for that flight.
Bump the people. Bump the bags.
Is that your first priority? Or is there something you can do? Maybe.
Well, rabbit hole a little bit more. Let's talk about a little bit of the performance issues.
Talk about it.
And the performance weight limits. So you have two basic types of performance weight limits. That would be your runway allowable takeoff weight, which is the weight tau is the weight at which the airplane can take off after an engine failure at V1, and V1 is the pilot's go, no-go decision speed for takeoff. Anything catastrophic that generally happens after V1, the aircraft and the runway have to have the performance to continue to accelerate, take off, and climb out. Or, also at V1, and just before V1 is the ability to abort the takeoff and still come to a complete stop on the remaining runway available. So that V1 speed is critical for performance. Not only can you lose your engine just after V1, and now you have to, like I said, accelerate and climb out at an angle that's at least 2.4% climb gradient, or you have to, just before V1, lose an engine, abort, and then still be able to stop. That'd be your accelerate stop distance that you have to have on the aircraft. So another thing that this comes into, especially with an obstacle or an obstruction limited runway, is that after V1, you have to be able to continue the takeoff and clear all obstacles in the flight path by a whopping 35 feet through the final climb phase. Not a lot, but you're still guaranteeing that you're going to be clearing obstacles. An airport that comes to mind that we talked about on a recent podcast lately is on the Airline Podcast show. There was a question about St. Martin and why was one airplane doing an opposite direction takeoff with a tailwind on 2.8 while everyone else was landing 10. And that's because there's a small hill, and by hill I mean a 1,500-foot mountain relatively close to the end of the runway there at St. Martin. So that's where your climb gradient would not be matched. And the climb limit weight is also determined by aircraft performance and is not dependent on obstacles in the takeoff path. So here, the climb limit weight, so this is a third calculation that we have, a third weight, ensures that the aircraft can meet the takeoff climb requirements in all climb segments, and the climb limit is determined by aircraft performance and not obstacles. So you have a runway limit, you have an obstruction limited runway, and then you have your climb limit weight. And now, what are some things that go ahead and affect all of these performances? And those would be bleeds, aircraft performance, a packs on versus a packs off takeoff. Packs would be air conditioning packs. Air conditioning packs go and use bleed air in most aircraft except one, the 787. That does not use any bleed air at all. But all the other aircraft use bleed air to take high compressed air off the engine. Well, when you turn off the packs and you turn off the bleeds coming off the engine, you get better performance. There's improved performance, which we can talk about in a bit. Any cutback, shortened runway, intersecting runway is something that you need to look at. Thrust settings, normal thrust versus assumed temperature thrust, your flap settings, your headwind, tailwind, temperature. Do you need anti-ice on the engines and any pressure altitude corrections? All of that clumped together is what affects your performance. So going back to Gregg's example, now we kind of put a little bit of coding on his example in Orange County. Let's continue your discussion about planning your flight this afternoon from sunny Orange County to somewhat sunny Chicago.
Sorry, I lost you there. You were cut out.
Oh, did I cut out?
Oh, okay. Sorry. I got you there. Yeah. So we were talking about what options. So you have a full aircraft, warm temperatures in Orange County, right? How do you plan that flight? So, what would you do? Does your flight planning system take all this into consideration, Mike?
Yes.
It does.
It gets literally thrown right in the middle of the dispatcher's face when they're planning a flight. You see what your weight limits are. You see what limit you're hitting and what limit you're over, and it throws it right in your face on what your limit is.
Okay, so does ours. So all we do is plug in the zero fuel weight, right? What is the zero fuel weight for that flight? Your temperatures are forecasted temperatures, and what the flight planning system will take all these performance
45 minutes
performance issues and automatically restrict
What?
your takeoff weight based
Your
on
mom needs to
the
go to bed.
parameters.
You need to make the bed.
Away from my.
It's okay. It's okay. Okay.
Okay. I apologize for people in YouTube land.
That's all right.
My wife had a question. So, what did you ask me there, Greg?
No, so I was asking you whether your flight planning system takes these in all into consideration, or do you need to bust out your E6B and whiz wheel to try to figure this stuff out?
No, it takes everything well in consideration, and we pretty much know from the beginning what our weight limit is and what we can go in, what our limiting factor is.
Right. So I'll walk you through what I did today to get this flight out. These are the thought processes that go through my mind as I'm planning this flight. So looking at the zero fuel weight, it's a full aircraft. I'm about to get everybody on, all the passengers and all the desired fuel that I want. I was about 12,000 pounds overweight. So you think about 12,000 pounds, an average passenger weighs, we use these 190 in the summer, I think. So 12,000 divided by 190 plus bags, it's like 230 pounds, I think is the factor. It came out to be like 30 passengers that we would have been overweight based on the fuel load that I wanted. Okay. So now it was a pretty good day today operationally. O'Hare was VFR. Don't need an alternate going into O'Hare. It was VFR in Orange County. En route, there was some weather somewhere over, Colorado, Kansas area. So it didn't need a whole lot of fuel today, right? FAR fuel says we have to have 45 minutes reserve landing fuel at your destination. Company policy says you have to land with at least an hour unless you and the captain decide to go lower. So I planned it, landing with it was an Airbus, so I think we were landing with 7,500 pounds, which translates to about an hour and 7 minutes, somewhere around there on a full aircraft. So I plug in the fuel that I want, right? And my system flashes red. It says, whoa, you're overweight. You can't go. Okay, so you look at the TAF, the weather for Orange County, right? Or not tailwind. So I changed that to no winds because you go with a variable wind means the wind can change at any time. It could be a headwind, it could be a tailwind. So I'm going to go with the more conservative number and say, okay, there's going to be no wind. So that automatically is going to give you a better takeoff performance than if you plug in a tailwind. Of course, you're taking a chance that when he gets to the runway, he gets a tailwind. Guess what? Now he's overweight. We'll get to that. So look at the temperature. Now, our flight planning system overcompensates on the temperature. So it was saying, oh, it's going to be 24C. Well, not really. You look at the forecast, you look at the RPM models, okay, it might be around 1920C. So I plug in what I think the temperature is going to be at that time. Okay. Then I start looking at the route. Okay, is this the least fuel route? Because again, we're weight restricted, we're takeoff weight restricted. We want to go with the least amount of fuel to get this thing off the ground. Okay, so I'm on the least fuel route, right? Cost index. Now, I don't know do you guys have cost index at Acme? Do you?
Yes.
I don't know. Okay,
we have a variable. Our flight planning system's a variable cost index.
So for those who don't know what a cost is, it's a number that you plug into the flight planning system. The higher the number, the faster you're planning the flight. The Mach number will increase with the higher number. If you plug in a lower number, it'll be a slower Mach level, generally a higher altitude, that kind of thing. So, okay, well, I want to put as least amount of fuel on this flight as possible, right? Go with a low cost index. And I think the econ cost index is 15, which basically is the lowest we can plan the flight. So it plans
You guys can't go any lower than 15? You guys can't go to 0?
We could go 0, but we have seen errors in the FMC if you plan it as a cost index 0. So I personally don't go lower than 15, but you probably could go to 0.
Do you guys have a limit on the top end of the cost index spectrum?
999.
So you guys could and will plan all the way to 999.
You could.
Okay.
Which is ludicrous speed for those who don't know what that is.
For us, our max cost index is limited by each fleet by either VMO, which would be VMO is max Mach number, basically, or maybe that's MMO. Anyway, the max speed of the airplane, or they have in their quote ride quality. Basically, it's getting too fast that it's shaking a little bit, and Acme doesn't like turbulence.
No. So yeah, each fleet of ours has a normal econ cost index, and if they're running late, you'll plan them like, I think the Airbus is an 80, and the 37s are the cost index 120, and so forth. And unless we get direction from management to say, hey, speed this thing up, then we usually don't go 999. It's just not worth the fuel burn for it. So cost index plays a huge factor in terms of your takeoff weight. Again, the higher the number, the more fuel you need to get that plane off the ground, or the more fuel that you need for your burn. It all gets calculated in. So next thing, I looked at the route, I looked at the temperatures, I looked at our fuel. Then the next thing that we can take a look at is what Mike talked about, the bleeds. Bleeds on, bleeds off. And you can this is kind of how I think of bleeds on, bleeds off. If you've ever ran your air conditioning in your car on a hot, warm, sunny day, and you turn the air conditioning all the way on, if you notice, your car does not perform very well. You'll accelerate, and it's just like it takes forever to get to a decent speed, and you can just feel it kind of sluggish. Well, the same thing in the airplane. If you turn those bleeds off, if it's on, it affects the performance of the aircraft. It doesn't give as much takeoff performance. Whereas if you turn it off, then you're getting better performance out of your engines. You can then take off, get a better performance. So you turn your bleeds off. So when I did all those settings, turned my bleeds off, winds, temperature, all that, it then increased my takeoff weight by about 6,000 pounds. So I was able to get 6,000 pounds more weight.
Now you're only 6,000 pounds overweight.
So now I'm only 6,000 pounds in the hole versus 12,000. Okay, so now we're looking at maybe, 10, 15 passengers. So that's when I get on the phone with my local operations manager. Hey, Mike, I've got a flight going to Chicago today out of Orange County, 6,000 pounds overweight. What do you want me to do? Do you want to stop
the people?
You want to bump the people? Do you want to stop the airplane somewhere to get where we can go and get everybody on? There's ramifications for that, obviously, if you're stopping somewhere. Or do we want to go nonstop and just kick the passengers off? Well, he's like, no, we want to go. We want to go nonstop. Okay, and of course he comes in. Did you do everything you could do? Yeah, I did. But one thing I didn't do is I didn't talk to the captain yet. Because the captain's the ultimate say as to how much fuel he wants. I can plan it any way I want. I could plan it with an hour of fuel, remaining fuel, and the captain can call and say, absolutely not, I want more fuel. Or I want less fuel. So I put in my dispatch notes, I said, release, please call dispatch. Didn't put anything else. This way, that'll generate a phone call. Captain called, and it's basically what I just discussed. It's a conversation between you and the captain. You go over all these things. I did everything I can do to get everybody on. Are you okay with going less? Maybe landing with 55 minutes, which is 10 minutes above your FAR fuel? Or do you want to go land with an hour, which is 15 minutes? And he was, again, it was a good weather day. There was not a lot of turbulence. He agreed to land with an hour of remaining fuel. Again, company policy states an hour, 15 minutes above FAR. So he went with an hour. in that situation, unfortunately, there was nothing we can do to get everybody on the flight short of making a stop somewhere. And when you stop somewhere, you're screwing up the routing of that aircraft. You're costing more to the company potentially because now you have misconnects. And Mike is an ops manager. He's an ops guy. He can tell you all about what happens when you stop an airplane. But
yeah, so when I have the situation at work and a dispatcher calls up and says, "Hey, I'm blank number of pounds overweight," and for us, especially last year when I was working the Airbus, it was our Salt Lake cities to the East Coast on the Airbuses, where just a hot day in Salt Lake City, temperature, same thing, altitude, heat, don't mix well, and then we have different thrust ratings on our Airbuses, so you almost hit the trifecta. You have a hot, high altitude airport with an airplane that has a lower amount of thrust out of its engines compared to anything else, basically. So when you look at that, a lot of the things that Greg mentions comes to my mind operationally. First of all, when I get this option, I want to look at it myself. So I pull up a flight plan. I flight plan it to see how I could get it to work. And generally speaking, I get the same amount of numbers. Or I see something different that the dispatcher didn't see, maybe a different route, maybe different this. Maybe if we tweak it a little bit here, we can get some extra weight. So I do the due diligence to check their work because like anything, four eyes are better than two. Another person taking a look at it could be better. And so I do that. And then we look at the economics of it. We look at, okay, a fuel stop, you're going to be an hour late. No matter where you stop, what you do, you're going to be an hour late pretty much regularly. So then it goes to how many connections am I busting? What's the crew doing after this? What is the airplane doing after this flight? And things like that. So luckily for me, out of Salt Lake last year, it was, okay, we're 8,000 pounds overweight. No, I've done everything. We're still 8,000 pounds overweight. All right, we're going to be bumping 25 people. Okay, bumping 25 people. The airplane's going to bed. Okay, the airplane's going to Raleigh-Durham. There's no connections. The flight crew has plenty of time. Okay, crew's got time. Crew's going to bed. Crew's going into rest, and they have plenty of rest requirements left. So for me, that's the four, okay, check boxes. All right, airplane, no issues. I'm not delaying anything else. Check. There is no downline connection, so I'm not inconveniencing anybody else. Check. Once you get all those check boxes, like, yeah, it makes sense. Let's stop. Omaha. Omaha is a good place. Let's stop in Omaha. And you then look at the weather in between origin and destination, and you suggest to the dispatcher, okay, how about you stop here in Omaha? How about Kansas City? Have you ever thought about going to St. Louis? In things like that. You want to stop somewhere so now you can still take everybody, but you're not overweight because now you're carrying 6,000, 8,000 pounds less fuel. And now you're going and landing in an airport that is closer to sea level and possibly cooler. And anything, whenever you want to go and stop and do a fuel stop, you want to make sure you run your flight plan and your numbers at the fuel stop airport before you make that decision, because you don't want to take the extra 20 people that you were going to bump and leave them somewhere in the middle where they definitely don't want to be. That's a big no-no.
That's happened. Not by me.
Happened.
Yeah, that's a big oops. James asked the question. He said, how do you tell the pilots about bleeds on or bleeds off? Well, a couple ways. In our flight planning system, there's a section on there for takeoff performance. So when we do all our takeoff calculations and we select, there's a drop down for bleeds on, bleeds off. You select it, it'll apply that to the flight plan. And it actually tells the captain in their flight paperwork how we calculated the takeoff parameters for that flight. So that way, when they get their paperwork, they'll see it on there. But the other thing that you want to do, at least what I do, is we have a section on there where we can put dispatch notes. And in Orange County, I'll tell exactly how I planned the flight. Orange County, runway 20 right, outside air temperature forecasted 21C, no winds, bleeds off. This way, it's all spelled out for the captain, and they know exactly how you plan the flight. Now, they'll call you a lot of times and say, well, can we get more weight? Well, we've done our due diligence, obviously, to try to get more weight for you. There's nothing else short of, stopping somewhere that's going to get you more weight per se. The Orange County does have the other runway 2. Sometimes that'll get you better weight depending upon, again, the winds, temperature, that kind of thing. But runway 2, you're going against the traffic coming into Orange County. So now you might have to wait to get a clearance for takeoff, which could be 45 minutes to an hour. And while you're waiting 45 minutes to an hour, it's getting hotter in Orange County. And the temp, so now you thought you might be able to go because you waited an hour. Now you're putting yourself in a hole for the other runway. So it's not as simple as just saying, hey, go on runway 2 and you're going to be fine to go.
When you guys up there at Acme Global put the remark on your flight plan, Captain, please call dispatch prior to departure. Do you generally get a phone call, or do you guys have any other tricks up your sleeve to
Well, so if I just put that on the flight plan, I would say about 90% of the time they'll call, okay? There's the few that don't even read their comments. All they look at their flight plan is how much fuel did you give them. So one way that I guarantee that they will call me is if I plan with remaining fuel of 45 minutes. That will automatically generate a phone call and say, whoa, wait a second, what's with the fuel here? You gave me only 45 minutes remaining. Well, I did that purposely so that you would call me. Or don't file their flight plan. That's the other thing. Because then they won't get their clearance. So
yeah. That was the big trick up at Acme Compass, is if you really wanted a pilot to call, don't file a flight plan at all. And then they'll sit there and say, you do the put remarks on there, and generally speaking, you put on there, Captain, please call dispatcher. And like you said, about 90% of the time, the crew would actually read the remarks and say, okay, yep, let's call them and see what they want to talk about. But you still don't file a flight plan. And then they call up and say, hey, we don't have a flight plan on file. And then you're professional and say, yes, Captain, that's because I wanted to have a conversation with you. Now, in your head, the unprofessional way says, well, if you would have read your release remarks, you would have realized that I wanted to talk to you, so that's why I didn't file your flight plan.
Exactly.
If you read the paperwork I give you, you'd understand that we have an issue that we need to discuss prior to your departure to make sure we're all on the same page.
Now, internationally, they're required, per the flight ops policy, to call us for a briefing for any flag operation. Which
I completely agree with. We have that. We had that at Acme Compass where it was a guaranteed, that was a discussion that had to happen. And now down here at Acme, it is a highly recommended policy, but not everyone does it.
Yeah, I've noticed there are quite certain pilots that don't. And it's funny because the ones that don't will send you the ACARs en route and saying, well, where's the turbulence and where's the solar weather that you put on your release? And I want to write back and say, well, had you have called for your briefing, we could have discussed this on the phone. But the professional side of me says, okay, here's where the forecasted turbulence is, and,
Well, Captain, I covered all of this in the pre-flight briefing. Unfortunately, you were absent for that.
Yeah.
Again, I would never say that to a pilot to their face. And I guess I kind of am right now, but that's the sarcastic people that us dispatchers are. We're also type A personalities, but we all get along in the end.
Yeah. So one other thing I want to talk about with landing. So we talked about takeoff performance, and that's pretty. The Orange County example was a good issue that we deal with daily. But one issue that I kind of want to talk about, well, yeah, I won't go over method 1, method 2 right now. But that's another whole animal. The other issue is landing performance, and
wait, we have to make sure the airplane can land.
yes,
we can't keep them up there.
They do need to land and come to a complete stop.
Never left one up there yet.
I'm going to use Denver as an example again because this airport just
sucks,
for lack of a better word, pisses me off. More so in the winter than in the summer. And so our 737s, the 900s, in the winter, what's happening when it's snowing outside?
It sticks to the runway.
It sticks to the runway, but also it sticks to your wings. You get icing, right?
Yeah.
You get ice. Well, the 737s, our 900s, if you turn the anti-engine icing on, it takes somewhere between a 15 and 20,000 pound weight penalty off your performance for landing.
Ouch.
It's huge. And so there's a change that they just adopted, and I'll get to that in a minute before I even talk about that. But so if you turn your anti-engine, anti-icing on, you are now restricting your landing weight. So you can get in the air fine, you can clear the terrain, all that kind of fun stuff. But now when you're landing, that added ice on your wings, you have to account for that in case the aircraft has to land and go around. Or I guess that's an oxymoron. If you have to go around, it affects your go-around performance.
Yeah, that'd be the landing climb limit weight.
There you go. That's where I was going with that. Thank you.
You're quite welcome.
So we'll be weight restricting these aircraft by 20 grand because it's snowing in Denver. And it only affects the 737-900s and the ERs. So the people in flight ops, after several years of bumping customers off flights because it snows in Denver, said, okay, we'll come up with a new approach in Denver where it'll increase your landing weight performance, your go-around performance, your climb limit, if you do a flaps 5 go-around. And that gives you an extra 10,000 pounds of landing weight performance. But you're still limiting your landing weight because of ice buildup on the wings, even with that flaps 5 go-around. Do you have anything like that at Acme?
Not that I know of. The 900s were just coming into the fleet when I stopped sending releases regularly. But I don't know of anything really aircraft performance wise, except certain MELs will kill us for landing weight. Can't think of any off the top of my head. See, you're lucky. See, our big winter ops airports, there's 2 of them that suck. We'll just say that. It's just what they are. And that's Chicago Midway. You guys don't fly there. Lucky. And LaGuardia. So those are our big issues when it comes to winter weather and landing performance.
Do you have? I don't want to change the topic here, but for LaGuardia, we just discovered this. I guess. Do you guys have a pier limit?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, there's pier limits on the weight and the number of wheels that you can have on there. That's why Acme back in the day used to fly L1011s and 767s to LaGuardia. And there were some aircraft that had the quote LaGuardia gear on them, and some of them that did not. And LaGuardia gear, I think it put an extra axle or set of wheels on there so they can meet those pier limit weights.
Yeah, and for those who don't know what a pier limit is, it's because the airport is built on water, right? And the concrete can't hold the weight of, if it's too heavy, the aircraft's too heavy, it can't hold all that weight. So you limit the weight the aircraft can be on the ramp.
Yeah, because basically the runway is a pier. The runway is built on pier pylons that go down into the riverbed, and so there's a structural weight that concrete. It's basically almost like a bridge.
Right. So we just started that on our 37s. All our other aircraft are fine.
Welcome to the 1970s. I mean, good for you guys.
They just discovered, oh, gee,
Oh, crap. There's a pier limit weight. You guys know that?
See, and we have load planners at Acme North that do a lot of this behind the stuff scenes for us. We don't actually have to go and tinker around with like center of gravity and all that funky stuff. And we have load planners that they'll send the weights to the crew after we finalize with the dispatch side of things. They'll go in and send the performance data, the final weights and all that kind of stuff. So we don't get involved in any of that, which saves us a lot of headaches. Except when they don't get their weights and the cockpit is yelling at us that they're waiting for their weights, and we have to get on the phone with load planning. And
you mean you dispatchers at Acme North go and delegate your FAR requirements of load planning to a separate department within the company?
Absolutely.
Yeah, so do we. They can have it. I did that once at Pinnacle when I used to work there as a regional. Someone had the ingenious idea to have central load planning done by the dispatchers as well. So not only were we releasing 90 flights a day, we were doing all the load control on 90 flights a day, which was kind of cool. I embraced it because you had full authority over your flights.
Not so much in our world. I mean, in terms of weights.
No, but you know, it's a phone call. They're a department within, at least with us, it's within our office.
It is, yes. But we get into more issues with our load planners than we do with our pilots, I think. You'll restrict the weight on we have the ability to cap the takeoff weight for whatever reason. If it's max fuel, let's say we put max fuel on the aircraft, max tanks, and we don't want load planning going in there and putting any more weight on the aircraft because you're planning them with minimum fuel as it is. So you'll go in there and you'll restrict the takeoff weight. Then you're getting a phone call from the load planner screaming at you and hollering at you that, well, wait a second, what happened to all my weight? Well, sorry, you're not putting any more weight on the flight.
Yeah, we have that too. There's ability for the dispatchers to set a dispatcher weight on the flight plan. When that for load planning, they call us too, and that basically becomes a new structural limit for load planning that they can't bust unless they get the dispatcher's approval. And most of the time, once you explain it to them, they get it and they say, "Oh, okay." But a lot of times, like, dude, that's all I can give you. Sorry.
Because they're getting it from the station, Hey, we need more weight. So then they're calling us and saying they're getting yelled at by the station. Well,
crap rolls downhill, or in this case with weights, crap rolls uphill.
Right. So,
do you have any other things that you want to cover when it comes to runway weights, landing weights, takeoff weights? We all weigh too much weights.
Well, unless you want to talk about method 1 and method 2.
No. Nope. The last time I knew about method 1 and method 2, I believe your colleague Gary Altman talked to me and taught me method 1 and method 2 in my dispatch class in college. And I think that might be the last time I went over method 1 and method 2.
You don't
Maybe
have to.
dispatch initial.
You don't plan for that, and your flight planning solution,
They
or
might, but I don't remember it off the top of my head.
oh, okay, but you do. Your flight planning system takes that into consideration, I assume.
Okay, now that we're down the rabbit hole, what's method 1 and what's method 2?
Method 1? Oh God! Now you're gonna make so. Method 1 basically assures it's an en route. It's an en route weight. It ensures that you're able to clear the highest terrain by
you're
5.
talking about terrain clearance.
Yeah.
And drift down for method 1 and method 2.
Yeah, that's what it is.
Okay. I know what you're talking about now. Go ahead and explain. I'll mop it up.
Okay. Well, okay, you go. No, method 1 assures that you clear terrain by 2,000 feet vertically and 5 miles laterally, correct?
I believe so. If you're in the terrain clearance.
If you're in an area, correct. So if you're flying over the Rockies, right, that you're able, if you lose an engine, if you go single engine, you're able to clear that terrain by 5 miles horizontally, 2,000 feet vertically. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
If you cannot clear that terrain, then you go into what's called method 2. And method 2 will restrict, or am I saying this backwards? Method 2 will restrict method 1 restricts your takeoff weight to make sure that you can clear the terrain by that 5 miles, 2,000 feet. If you can't, then you go into method 2, which will then give you extra weight, but it'll give you a drift down alternate en route. So, example, you're flying Orange County O'Hare. If you lose an engine, if you're able to clear that terrain, then it's a method 1 flight plan is what it's called. You do not need an alternate should you lose the engine.
And this all stems back to FAR 121.191.
Thank you.
En route limitations for
See,
one.
He's looking it up. See, he's got the cheat sheet.
Hey, man,
I'm just going off my head here.
Hey, you opened your flight operations manual. I've got mine up too. So anyway, this comes back to part 121.191, and what Greg is talking about is that en route limitations for one inoperative engine requires that for planning purposes, the loss of an engine en route does not jeopardize the safety of the flight due to the inability of the aircraft to maintain a safe terrain clearing altitude. This FAR provides the following 2 methods for dispatch, method 1 and method 2. One is an en route limit that requires that the aircraft takeoff weight that should an engine fail in cruise will be enable an aircraft to clear all obstacles within the 5 nautical miles within the filed route by 1,000 feet with a positive climb gradient. Method 2 permits an airplane with an inoperative engine to drift down from the cruise altitude to a suitable landing airport while clearing all obstacles within 5 nautical miles of the filed route by 2,000 feet and have a positive climb gradient at 1,500 feet above the airport. So method 1 at Acme we call terrain clearance, and method 2 we call drift down. And mostly all of 99, I think almost all the flights, I don't even think we have an option for option 1. Most of our flights, I think almost all of them, are under option 2, where we have to name drift down alternates.
Really?
Yes.
See, we're the opposite. I'd say about 90% of ours are method 1.
Yep. We if you have a drift down issue, you get a red X on the flight planning system, and then you have to go and add an airport and name it a drift down alternate. And then the flight planning system is smart enough. You hit the get alternates button, and then you pull down the drop down menu, and then it puts a little asterisk next to all of the airports that will fix its problem for you. And if the airport doesn't have an asterisk, then that's what's the problem.
Is that a suitable alternate or adequate alternate?
I think most of ours are C70 alternates.
Okay. Yeah, because these have to be suitable alternates for us, and they have to meet all the alternate minimums. And
they have to be alternate. Yeah, they have to be ultimate minimum, weather minima, NOTAMs, all of that other stuff. They can't just be a chunk of concrete and things like that. So that's another thing that can limit your takeoff weight is the unlikely event of an engine to fail en route. Much like ETOPS is based on the unlikely event of an uncontained engine failure causing a rapid decompression of the cabin. Or, recently, the not so unlikely event. Alrighty.
I think we covered that pretty good, right?
I think we beat that dead horse.
If anyone has questions, just send Mike a question. He'll answer it for you.
Yes, if anyone has any questions, send them to Gregg at flyinglife.com. Alrighty, let's wrap this up. Do you have anything else you want to talk about?
No, I gotta.
I hit the end of the show notes.
I'm just preparing for my hell week at work. I've got afternoons tomorrow. I got a quick turn to day shift on Friday. Then I gotta work Saturday morning, quick turn to midnights, work 3 midnights, then quick turn on next. I've got like 4 quick turns coming up this week. It's just gonna be brutal.
That sucks.
Yeah. So I need a place to crash in the city somewhere because I am not driving.
If anyone has a crash pad in downtown Chicago, somewhere near a really tall tower on the near west side, contact flyinglife.com. You know,
on Twitter.
A dispatcher colleague that would really pay top dollar for one.
Absolutely. So that's what's going on in my life.
Gotcha. I got too much going on to talk about. Mainly, biggest issue right now is the baby woke up. My mother-in-law wants to go to bed. I'm in the office, which is also the guest bedroom. And yeah.
Yeah, have fun.
I love my mother-in-law. We can send a story later about her adventures to get to Atlanta today. But let's go ahead and wrap this up. If you like what you're hearing, if you like the show, if you want to support us to help pay for media costs, media hosting, website hosting, things like that,
microphones.
Feel free to please, microphones. Feel free to go out and find us on Patreon, patreon.com/flyinglife, I believe it is. Go ahead and become a supporter of the show. Every once in a while, I do a little dispatch remarks segment that goes out to the patrons only. I can talk offline to Gregg about that. Maybe we can do a couple more of those and do that more regularly for that and get some more back behind the scenes information. Show notes for this episode will be at flyinglife.com/2018/36. You can find me at Twitter at flyinglife. Facebook.com/flyinglife is where we are on the Facebook. Gregg, tell me about your Twitter handle.
WXFan1978.
I don't see that changing anytime soon.
I keep saying I'm going to do it, and I haven't hit the trigger. It will. Nope. It will eventually.
Yep.
It took me a while.
Eventually, too.
It took me, a couple months to get a microphone. It'll take me a couple more months to change my Twitter.
If you have any questions, any topics that you want us to talk about, please send them to contact@flyinglife.com. Honestly, we do have 300 and some pages of operation manuals that we can talk about, but I kind of wanted to know what you're all thinking and want to have questions about. So please send us any show topics, show ideas, anything like that our way. Opening and closing music is from bensound.com, bumper from purpleplanet.com. We're on Stitcher Radio, iTunes. I have not reached out to Google Play yet, but yeah, that's it. So until next time, thanks for listening. Thanks for hanging out with us, all of you who joined us live. Until next time, have a great one. outtakes might go here. Dude, I'm going to make you edit an episode one time because your pen clicking is going to be the death of me.
Is it really that loud?
I'm going to send you a screenshot and show you. It is equally as loud as your voice.
You should have said stop.
I thought about it, but I'm like, whatever. I'll deal with it. It's why I do multi-track recording. I can see where you're talking. I can see where I'm talking.
Oh, yeah, we should do that.
Silence all that out.
And then I dropped my microphone.
All right, brother. All right, I'm going to end this.
Get a good night.
Hold on a second. Don't leave yet. I'm going to stop the recording. We can talk more for a second. Hey, thanks for joining us, everybody. We're out.
Thanks.